Senator Ludlam.
Thanks, Mr Acting Deputy President. It was nice being in the chamber for that, Senator Faulkner. Happy birthday indeed. I rise to speak as a friend of the ABC and as a friend of the SBS, the Special Broadcasting Service. And I'm one among many friends of Australia's broadcasters, speaking in particular as an admirer of the group Friends of the ABC and Friends of the SBS, who do great public advocacy, who inform their membership, who play the role, I suppose, of watchdog and advocate in defence of public broadcasting in Australia, but also in the sense of the broader sense of the term Friends of the ABC, as one Australian among millions who admire, respect and trust the work of our public broadcasters. There is, unfortunately, a problem, and the problem is that what passes for a policy development process under the Abbott government, which was elected without much of a clue as to what it wanted to actually create if it did win government, had a bit of an idea about what it wanted to destroy, but not a great deal about what it wanted to create, effectively outsourced its policy development process to a rather ambiguous organisation known as the Institute of Public Affairs. The IPA published a hit list of 75 policy recommendations, followed by another 25 a short while later, and 3 of them are relevant to people who consider themselves friends of the SBS and friends of the ABC. Item number 47, cease funding the Australia Network, silence Australia's voice in the Asia-Pacific region, our diplomatic voice, the public broadcasting arm of the ABC that reaches deep into China, Japan and other countries in Southeast Asia. Item 50, break up the ABC and put out to tender each individual function. Item 51, privatise SBS, having outsourced policy to the Institute of Public Affairs, being reasonably awake to the demands of the Murdoch press, who I think you could probably say played quite an important role in the change of government and the events leading up to it last September. The Abbott government, particularly the Prime Minister and the Communications Minister Malcolm Turnbull, has basically proceeded to work its way through the IPA's hit list, and so this is where we find ourselves tonight. If you were going to start softening up the broadcasters to the demands of the Institute of Public Affairs and its unknown financial backers, and those in the Murdoch press who would like probably just to see their competitor eliminated from the market, you would probably commission an efficiency review recommending that the ABC and SBS cut hundreds of jobs, merge their back office functions, replace more content with advertising, charge for content that which was previously free, outsource all production to the private sector, cancel new building construction. And what do you know? Such an efficiency review was commissioned and then tabled. Efficiency appears to have a curious meaning to this government. Where's the efficiency in funding for absurd urban freeway projects that have no cost-benefit analysis, no business case, no environmental impact assessment? What's efficient about handing $920 million to Roe Highway for a project that will never go ahead? What's efficient exactly about purchasing $24 billion worth of fighter aircraft that can't take off because they catch fire? Not a lot of efficiency there. The ABC and SBS, on the other hand, will be subject to efficiency towards, I guess, in pursuit of the ends identified by the IPA. All cloaked in statements by the Prime Minister, or by the Communications Minister, claiming that he too is a friend of the ABC, and by the Prime Minister in the lead up to the election saying there'd be no cuts to the broadcaster. Well, that hasn't worked out very well, has it? The efficiency review effectively has identified the down payment that was made by the ABC, the abolition of the Australia Network, cuts tens of millions of dollars out of the broadcaster's overseas arm, which will hit current affairs and news reporting in the region back into Australia. So that's efficiency. That's not working out particularly well. Then what you would probably do would be to stack the board in a rather dismal repeat of what I imagine you got up to in your student politics days. And if you can't stack the board by direct political appointment, you would abuse the process set up by Labor Minister Stephen Conroy and supported by the Greens in making board appointments at arm's length from politics. And so, of course, that is what appears to be underway now. I'm going to read in a series of quotes relating to the ABC and to public broadcasting, and let's see if we can identify who said them. How about this? It's a Soviet-style workers' collective, or it's a sort of private club promoting its own ideology at taxpayers' expense with no apparent control by its board and no real incentive to change. Fascinating, isn't it? Here's another one. Most of its news is opinion. Its fact-checking is the new way of declaring its own approved version of the facts, and the role of Media Watch is apparently to intimidate the commercial media. Here's another one. It gets a herd mentality, takes an official view about what you, the citizen, should believe in. What about this one? This is a cracker. Mark Scott should resign. Or better yet, I think it should be sold. The best thing to do might be to start again. And as you might have guessed, these are comments by very high-profile commentators who have, over the past several years, declared their loathing of public broadcasting. Now, that's not that unusual, and both of the broadcasters are strong enough to stick up for themselves. And in fact, those kind of attacks on public broadcasters or on any media organisation should probably tell us that they're doing their job well. William Randolph Hearst said years and years ago, news is something somebody doesn't want printed, all else is advertising. So if the ABC and SBS aren't copying a flogging from somebody, then they're probably not doing their job very well. And both of the broadcasters are built on fairly strong foundations. They're run by strong-minded people and they can stick up for themselves. But there are times when the ABC and the SBS will need friends. And in my view, this is very much one of those times. Because the Abbott government, through its communications minister and through the Office of the Prime Minister, has declared war on public broadcasting, war on editorial independence, war on board independence, war on funding and function. Let's not pretend that this government is a friend of public broadcasting at all. Why else would you appoint people like Janet Albrechtsen and Neil Brown, to whom those quotes that I read in a moment ago can all be attributed, to a 4-person panel which then oversees future board appointments to the ABC and SBS? These are people who hate the ABC and want it to die. Why would you put them in charge of selecting the board of an entity that they either don't think should exist at all or who have been profoundly critical of its editorial direction and tone, sharply at odds with the views of the vast majority of Australians who trust and depend on the ABC, and particularly the regional broadcasters and those who have rather limited alternative channels for news and current affairs? Why would you put people like that in charge of this important role? And it was something that the Greens voted for in an attempt to place these appointments at arm's length from politics. And of course the Abbott government's just gone around them. Very clever, extremely cynical, and it needs to be fought. Janet Albrechtsen is obviously a fairly strident commentator for News Limited publications who just want to get rid of a competitor, and they're not ambiguous about it. They don't try and pretend that that's not what they're up to. Neil Brown, former Liberal MP and Minister, these are not people who are outside the political process. Mr Brown wants the ABC to be scrapped and started again from scratch. So that's where we have come to. Polling by Central Research that was published late last year shows, as it always does, that the ABC is Australia's most trusted media outlet, and SBS is only a few percentage points behind. Trailing them significantly after that are the commercial publications and commercial channels that, some worse than others obviously, have done so much to try and undermine the credibility of public broadcasters, to very little effect, I should say, because most Australians are still strongly affectionate towards the ABC and SBS. If this is the kind of government that is struggling desperately behind in the polls, picking one fight after another indiscriminately with every part of Australian society, under attack from our allies overseas and from groups right across civil society here in Australia, what would you do? Would you declare yourself a friend of the ABC? Would you just go and attack it That's what's underway. It needs to be resisted. The ABC and SBS need their friends.